Hey there, welcome to today's episode. It's going to be a live unedited session. Apologies for any background noise. Been quiet on the channel because there's a lot of works going on in our street. We've got cranes and diggers and all kinds of stuff. Today is kind of the same, but I just wanted to make something. I need to make beats on a regular basis, otherwise I feel a bit strange. And I wanted to record that process, so we've got the MPC 1000 out. We're going to just do something live unedited. I don't really have any great plans in mind. And before we dive in, let me just say a big thank you to all of those who have checked out my second channel. I posted about this. If you follow my main channel, this channel, you'll see a community post that said I was starting a second channel. Don't worry, it's not to kind of water down what's going on here. If anything, it's just to tidy up a little bit. The second channel is called Acapella Cat, and that's all it's for. You won't be seeing me over there. There'll be no video content like this. It's just for hip-hop acapellas. Certainly at first, I might expand on that later on once we've built a good hip-hop library. I've uploaded around 128 so far. It's going to be something I'll be doing in my spare time, evenings, and I'll be batch uploading them. And that's the reason I want a separate channel for it. I don't want that interfering. So if you've got a bit of content like this, I don't want the next thing on the channel to be 30-odd acapella videos. It just doesn't help people find what they're looking for. So it's got a separate little home, only for acapellas, no other types of content. If you're interested in it, I do encourage you to go and check it out. We have about 120 or so subscribers so far. Thank you to all of those who have been over and subscribed. I don't ask that very often, but if you can help me out with it, I'd really appreciate it, because the first milestone is 500. The bigger one being 1,000 subscribers lets me monetize it and means I get something back in return for my hard work. And it is hard work. You have to take the audio file. It has to be stripped down to the acapella, which we then have to create a video for. Things have to be cleaned up. There's a lot in terms of putting a lot of acapellas out there, and 100 plus so far has taken me a little while. But it is a library that I want to build upon. I started with 100 acapellas, and then what I've done is I've started to put those into artist playlists. It's all very early days, but once we've got a good structure and a library of artists, I can then populate those lists full, just make them really big, and hopefully have one of the best acapella channels on YouTube. Anyway, to the beat making part, the plug is over. MPC 1000, I got this thing back off the shelf because it's just been sitting there gathering dust, and I don't know why I don't use it more. Every time I turn it on, I fall back in love with it, because I've said it before, it's almost the same as using my modern MPC, but without the headaches of the firmware and the bugs and the things that are currently going on with the Kai. Still ongoing. I still haven't seen many new updates or any resolutions for some of the things I'm worried about. But with this old thing, JJOSXL, the paid version, it gives you, I would say, 80–90% of what a modern MPC does. We've got sort of instrument kind of modes where you can play chromatically and you can do all that kind of stuff. We've got all of the sample chopping, I don't know, it just basically does everything, bar, say, the plugins that you get on a modern MPC. I don't use the plugins anyway. I'm not really a big plugin fan. And there'll be other things, of course, but they do a hell of a lot. So we're going to explore it a little bit today, just make some kind of beat for the sake of doing it. I've got the Chroma console out so that we can maybe run some samples through and then into the MPC. And the SP404 Mark II is also set up so that I can kind of loop things around. And I'm just going to start there by just checking we have no effects turned on the SP. And currently everything should be bypassed coming from this foot pedal. In fact, what I'll do is I'll turn these off as well to make sure we're starting. We're starting with a blank template. We've got 80 BPM and 2 bars, and we're going to put something together. So we're going to go to mode and load. And this is all reading from a CF adapter that has an SD card in it, which is in the main slot here. Runs just fine. A couple of tips and things just as we're going through. If you have folders with a lot of samples in them, maybe say more than like 100 samples per folder, it can get a little sluggish reading from the SD card, but I find as long as I keep it relatively lean. And if we want to load up like a kick drum, which is how we want to start, let's go to kicks. You'll notice I've separated mine out into folders, so I'm never overpopulating a folder. Just find it, it just works. So let's go into kicks. Play buttons or the pads to audition. Or if you hold it down on shorter samples, you can use the data wheel to kind of auto audition. You can see me running through. If you move too quickly, sometimes it doesn't really like it. And if you try and do this with really long samples, it also doesn't seem to like it. But for drums and stuff, it's okay. I think this is... let me go up one, let's see. No, this one. Choose this first kick drum. You'll notice I can assign it to a pad. If you don't see that window, the window button here while you're browsing, press this window button, sample assign pad window, just turn it on. By default, I think it's off, which means you can only load to the sample pool and then assign. But you want to treat it like a modern MPC. I want to be able to assign to the pads. So that's what we can do. Move up to hats and perks. Let's go in here. We'll try and be somewhat speedy today. That one's good enough. Kind of like this one. I'm going to load that onto pad 2. It's the hi-hat we're going to use. And I'm going to keep it really simple just to start off. Let's look for a snare drum now. And go in here. And again, you'll notice I've got all of these like snare drum folders set up. So let's go in here and see what we got. Kind of like that one, actually. I'm going to load that onto the third pad. And then we're going to go to mode and trim where we can look at those samples. So we've assigned them to a program. Quickly, my main 2 bars 80 BPM is my template. As part of the template, I've created a track called drums and named it. And I have a program set up called drum samples because this is generally how I always start. I also have a second track, which is for chops. Now, I don't assign a program for that because normally once I've recorded the sample and I chop it up, I then create a program and assign one there. So it just saves me a step. So 2 basic tracks, we've got drums and we've got chops. We're loading up. So we go mode and program and go to sample. You will see the samples that we've loaded into that particular program. It's nice because it shows us stereo, and I'm going to talk about that as we run through. But first, mode and trim, so that we can just take a look, because it's quite a quiet snare drum. If I go to edit and go to normalize, we can normalize. The thing with normalization on these MPCs, and it's the same on these older ones as it is on the newer ones, you can go beyond. So if I go back into edit for a second, normalize level at 100%, you think that's the max, that would be like 0 dB. But you can actually go beyond that. You can go up to 200%. You can do the same with the newer MPCs as well. If you go beyond like the 0 dB level and you push it too much, it's going to introduce like digital distortion. But sometimes a little boost can be kind of nice. There's a certain little bit of flavor that can be added. We're just going to leave that there, but I wanted to point that out while we're here. So I just want to make sure I'm getting the best volume out of the samples. So that's this one. If you're looking here and you see these extra samples, normal, metro, and there's another one, accent metro. They're custom samples for the metronome. If we go to main and we go to click, down the bottom here, I can select any sample that's loaded into the sample pool to act as my metronome. This is Ableton that's been recorded. It's part of my template. I just leave them in there the whole time. But you can set 2. So you've got one for the accent note. So it's like 1, 2, 3. And then you've got that like accent, don't you, as you're counting through your metronome. You can set 2 individual wave files as samples. Could be anything. Could be somebody laughing if that's what you wanted. But I use Ableton's metronome because I prefer it to the MPC. It's a cool thing. You can't do that on modern MPCs. Not that I've discovered so far. I guess you could if you loaded the sample in before some clever clogs comes in there and, you know, you've put it in. But not as easy as that, I don't think. So we've got this. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back to mode. Kick looks okay. And I'm looking at the snare. That's fine. And then the hi-hat. Got a little bit of dead space on the hi-hat, which doesn't really bother me too much, but we can just get rid of that using our start point and the data wheel. And we'll say, okay, we're kind of good to go, I think. I'm going to go to main, mode and pad 15, and then shift and view. And we're going to go into a step sequencer because this has a step sequencer. I don't know how many people know that. Some people have never discovered this screen. I know that because last time I posted about this, people were kind of surprised. But you do. You have a step sequencer. Now, I like finger drumming and putting the drums in that way. Of course, you can record that way, but sometimes you might want to do it this way. There are some benefits. The first one being that when we use these cursor buttons, that's how we input to a step. So there's no audible preview, which is a little bit strange. You think when you press a pad, we're changing the pads. I can see the name there, but I can't hear it. I'll start to hear it when I input it to a step. But just bear in mind that if you, I don't know, your hi-hat isn't named hi-hat, it's just some random sample with 001 or something, you need to know what it is because that's how you select the samples, by this little label at the top. These are all labeled clearly enough that I can tell what they are, but just be mindful. When I press play, the playhead moves. This is the first bar. It will stay on the first bar unless we change it with the bar button and move into the second bar. We've got a 2-bar sequence. If I had a 16-bar sequence, obviously, I could scroll through all 16 bars and start inputting to those steps. But you'll notice it stays on whatever bar you're currently working on, in this case, bar 1. No volume because we haven't put anything onto a step. If I select my kick drum and I go to velocity, which is highlighted, we've got the little cursor. As I add some velocity, it adds it, you know, to the step. So there's our kick drum coming in. Could have a quieter one here. Maybe another one over here. So really simple. When I want to do snare drums, I can move over. You don't have to press stop. I'm doing that because I'm chatting to you guys, but you can just do all of this in real time. Let's say we wanted a snare drum here and one here. Really simple way of doing things. If we go to the hi-hats, we can take a look at these other little options. So you can select all. That's a hi-hat on every step. Or we could change that and we could say, I want it on, you know, something, these first 2 steps, leave 2 steps. Simple way of just getting a different rhythm. Every other step. Very classic. But the cool thing here is that you can move those around still. So if I wanted the next steps along, I could do it. If we were talking about these two, you'll notice they've all moved over. So you can use these to select multiple things at the same time. Even this one here, I can just be cycling through, selecting whatever I want. That comes in pretty handy because if we do all and put fixed velocity across the hi-hat, it's not going to sound great. But it puts them into place. So then if I wanted to change the velocity, but I want to do it in some kind of controlled way, of course I can do it individually. We could deselect and I could just come in and start changing these on an individual level. But if we do all of them like this, I could move over and say, you know what, I want all of these other ones here to be slightly quieter. If I choose this, I want to move over one again and choose the third and have that somewhere in the middle in terms of velocity. So it's kind of coming up and down. Just going to give it a lot more life. At the bottom, you have duration, which is for the duration of the note. Now, we're not going to be touching upon that, but if you're working with something melodic, longer samples, and you don't have them set to one-shot playback, where they're going to play the whole sample, you can control the length of those notes when you're messing around. Comes in pretty handy for other stuff. If we move down a level, it's sift or shift. Now, it says sift, but shift is what I would call it, because you can shift the notes. If I select all of these hi-hats and I want them before the grid, you can see a minus amount all the way along. If I want them after the grid, I can shift and move them all after. So that's how you're going to get your timing, your swing, your drunken groove, if that's what you want. I'm going to maybe make these just ever so slightly behind the grid. And if I move over to something like my snare drums, as long as I've got everything selected, I can just move those 2 notes there. The same thing. I want to just move the snare drums a little bit lazy. If you want to do it on an individual level, we turn this off. Let's say the kick drums. I could move over here to these kick drums where we've got 2 kick drums quite close together. Plays like that. Maybe I want that little timing between those to be closer, so it's quicker. Or maybe I want it quite lazy, so it's got like a kind of sort of, different type of swing. We can set that to something like 6. And you can hear it just takes longer before that note kicks in, of course. So then we could just start adding in a bunch of other notes. Maybe add a little ghosty hi-hat in towards the end, and a ghosty snare even. Just real subtle, just a little detail there, and we could maybe dial that one back. So you can understand using this step sequencer. It's not the deepest in terms of its functionality, but it's good enough. It's certainly good enough to get some groove, some swing, and an easy way, if you're not too into finger drumming, to put your drums together. And I just don't see people talking about these devices. I mean, the MPC 1000 is not being spoken about a lot at the moment anyway, but even in other videos, I haven't really seen too much about this little step sequencer, but one exists if you use JJOSXL, which is the paid version. Let's go to main. So you'll see it's populated 1 bar. We could have moved over to bar 2, started doing the same thing. But for now, let's just keep our lives simple. So we'll move to main, 1 bar. I'm going to jump up to the top, go to bars, which is the length of the sequence, change that to 1 and say do it. Every time you do that and you adjust the bar length for your sequence, you'll notice it messes with your looping. It'll turn it off. So you just need to be mindful that this F1 button here turns the loop for the sequence off or on. I want it on because I want it to keep looping. Just like that. We've now loaded those samples into a program. There are different ways to change volumes. You've got some mixers. So you've got a mixer for the pad level and you've got a mixer down here that is for the track level. But when I'm just playing around with drums, I probably do it from the program. So mode and 7 for the program. and just come in here. By default, everything is set to 80 of 100. So we're going to turn this up a little bit. I'm going to say maybe 95 for my kicks and snares, and then just see how that kind of feels. It's not bad. I'm probably going to turn the hi-hats down a little. Before I do that though, with the hi-hats, as long as they're selected, if I go to filter, I can apply a filter per pad, per sample. So here I might apply a low pass. You've got high pass, band pass, some EQ options as well, but we'll go with low pass. Go to the frequency, just run a little high end out of the hi-hats. Just brings the volume down and makes them a little bit more lo-fi, which I think fits in with the other drums, just my personal taste. Notice at the end here, there's this little bit of dead space. It's because there's a secret second filter that if you press filter, you can actually apply 2 filters per pad, per sample. So if I wanted a high pass on top of this, a band pass, another low pass, whatever, I can add it over here, but you have to press filter again to find it. It's kind of a little secret trick. Anyway, let's go back to the volume. Just going to make them quieter still for the hi-hats. The reason for that being is that I want to apply some effects, and I'm going to use the SP in order to do it. I want to try a little bit of vinyl sim, because I like the vinyl sim on my drums to give a little bit of compression, a little bit of oomph, and slightly more kind of lo-fi feel. So let's turn that on. Go to here, and I think it's already set up with the vinyl sim because it's one of my go-tos, but yeah, we've got it set up. Let's turn it on and play around with that. Yeah, just brings the noise floor up, adds a little bit of oomph. Just sounds really nice. One thing though, it's got compression, so it's bringing those hi-hats up and making them louder. It's certainly making them more prominent. So before we do any resampling or baking this in, we're going to just adjust the volume again to taste. For my personal taste, I'll probably just take the volume of the hi-hats down a bit more. Yeah, good enough. And you can still hear from where we put the hi-hats in originally that they're kind of coming up and down. There's a volume, velocity, level change there. So let's say that was good enough, which it is. We could obviously do more. We could pitch our drums, we could play around, but that's going to be good enough for me for now to get something going. I want this effect from the SP, but because we're running it through, I need to send it back into the MPC to make it a permanent change. And that allows us to do a couple of things. The first thing is, you'll notice here, it tells us that all of these are stereo samples. That's the one thing I like about being in program mode. It tells you if you're using stereo or mono. These are all stereo. We have a polyphony voice limit on this device. 32 voices, which might seem quite limited, but because of resampling and the things I'm going to show you now, it's not really that much of a problem. Even if I don't put things into mono, or I just continue working as I am here, keep all my drums separate, I very rarely run into too many issues. But let's say you make very complex beats and you need to get around that. Here's one way to do it. Now the cool thing, if you go to mode and other, you can see the voice monitor. It tells you how many voices you're currently using. So if we play our little drum loop, jumped up to 8, just let it play for a minute, jumps up to 10, up to 12, and I think it'll probably settle about 12. But you can see, we've used up 12 voices out of the 32 quite quickly, just using some drums and the way we've got things overlapping. So the way that we get around that is to kind of resample. You can resample internally from the MPC. You can set the inputs to record from itself, but we're going to do it by taking it through this SP and bringing it back in. The reason I mention that is because it will have some effect on what we choose in terms of our recording mode. So we go to mode and record, which is pad 5, and we set a couple of things. The first one is the monitoring. We're going to be sending this thing back through, so you need to turn monitoring off. It's really important, because if you don't, you're going to get a feedback loop and it sounds bloody awful. I've done it many times just by mistake, and you'll get some really horrible noises coming through. So monitoring has to be off. That's the first thing. We don't really need the drums to be in stereo, although if we record this as a stereo loop now, which we can do, we're going to go down from 12 voices to just 2, because for every single stereo sample, it uses 2 of those voices. A mono sample will use 1 voice out of your 32 limit, but a stereo sample uses 2. So we could get from 12 down to 2. That would be a perfectly good start. But if we want to go further, we could actually make these mono. The drums, I don't think it matters that much if the drums are right down the middle, if we maybe keep the other melodic elements stereo and keep those kind of more separated. So mono left and right, you can choose the channel if you want, but I'm going to sum it into left and right down. And then the other thing here is the threshold. If we set this up now, my little switcher box allows me to choose multiple different sources to come into the MPC. So I'm going to switch this from channel 1, which it's currently on, which is the iPad, up to 2 and up to 3, which will be coming from the SP, but it has a separate volume control as a safety net. So when I press play, we can hear the drums, but we're not getting any volume unless I open this up, and there we go. Got some volume. And we've got this record gain here to just dial things in a little bit as well. Don't want it too loud. I don't want to sort of make the signal too hot coming into the MPC, because we can always normalize and bring the volume up. So we just play with the side of caution. You'll notice it triggering here. That is the vinyl effect. So the little crackly noise, the static, some of that compression. It's not a defect. It's just doing that because even though there's a sample that isn't playing, that effect is still being brought through. The reason that's important is because we want to set our threshold. Now mine's set okay, it's set quite high. But if you've got yours set low, when you start recording, that effect noise is going to trigger the recording maybe before you want it to. So I want to set that above this little effect noise that's kind of triggering every once in a while to make sure that the drums are the only thing that triggers it. So when I press record now, gives me my time. You'll see a countdown. We'll get about 20 minutes, I think, in mono to record into this particular MPC. Plenty of time. But when I press this, it's now going to trigger and it's going to wait to record until it reaches the threshold. There we go. Going to do 2 bars and I'm going to leave it long enough that it's got like an extra kick drum to chop back to. To be organized, you should really rename things. It gives you an opportunity here. If you've been playing with something, so whatever I was working on last, I was using some chops, I renamed it chops. It remembers that and it just kind of keeps calling it that, but that's not very handy. So here we move the data wheel. You can input via the pads if you like. It's kind of like an old school mobile phone. You've got A, B, C, D, E, F. You just need to remember those. I find it easier to just use one finger on this arrow button and to use the data wheel to scroll through. So I'm going to say D because we're going to call this drums. Move over to the R, and I'm just using the arrow button in between to shift along, obviously. We've got our U, M, and S, just like that, and delete, and say enter. It's going to rename that sample as drums so that when we're looking for it, it's going to be easy to find. We say keep it, and then we can do that. We can go to mode and record, or mode and trim even on pad 6, and there's our resampled loop. We need to turn the effect back off here because if we keep it on, obviously we're doubling up on the effect from the SP. So we can turn that off, and I'm going to just turn this down and move it back to channel 1. So I'm just make sure we're not getting anything from the SP because of that feedback loop. There's the drums. You can hear they've got that effect applied. That's all been baked in. And what I want to do is just find the endpoint. But quickly, just take a look at your start point. Sometimes there is a little bit of dead space. Let's just quickly go back. Sorry, my bad. You need to drop down 1 to go to your start point. Zoom in. And I'll probably just take it out to roughly there. We can discard or truncate. And then I just want to do the same thing for the endpoint. So I think it's where this big kick drum is, would be where we need to loop up. So we're going to do that. And I'm just going to zoom in for a second and probably take it to roughly about there. Do the same thing, truncate. If you need to check that it is looped, you can turn looping on, make sure this is set at the beginning, and just hold a pad down. There you go, we get the idea. And then we can basically send this, or, we're going to keep this and apply it to the new program. So if we go to main, I've already showed you I created a drums track with the drum samples program. We put all of those in. We don't need those anymore. We could create a new program, but what's the point when we've already got one called drum samples? So the first thing, just while we're here, I'm going to erase because we don't need any of this MIDI information anymore. That's for the old drums that we've just resampled, so we don't need that. And because we made it 2 bars long, I'm going to make sure that my little bars here is set to 2 bars to match. We can extend that, say do it. It's going to turn the loop end off again, so I'm going to turn it back on. And now when we go to the program, the original drums still exist, but if we do shift and all, I can move over to those drums and just scroll back to delete all of the samples out of the program. It's really simple. Shift and Alt to get rid of that. I want to put my new loop on pad 1, so I then just search for it, which is called drums because we named it that, and it is a mono sample. So there we go. Bounced everything down, created this new drum loop. It's into the program, and all we really need to do is now just record that in. So if we go to main and we do shift and record, or record and play start even. I usually let it loop because sometimes it just needs to catch up with itself. There you go. It's playing perfectly now, but sometimes you get like a little discrepancy at first. Also, I didn't check to see if we had any timing correction currently enabled. That might have some impact on it. If we do shift and timing correction, actually my timing correction is currently off. It should have been set because it's a loop, so we close that. If we just go into the step sequencer real quick though, I can just check there's no problem with that being at the beginning of the loop. There's my cat being a pain in the backside. If we do mode and 15, and then shift and view, I can search for that sample, which is here. And to be honest, looking at the shift, if there was any problem, it would be off the grid, but actually it is right at the beginning. So that loop is fine, but that's a way that you can check it. Let's go back to main and main again. Now, one thing I want to show you, if we go to mode and other, we can take a quick look at our voice monitor where currently we have 0 voices. Now, we're going to play this. So we've got 1 voice. Just going to let it play for the 2 bars. Now, you'll hear it with your ear. It starts to double up, which then creates 2 voices. Now, that's not what we want, but I just want to show you how you fix it, especially for people who are new to this way of working. But if we go to mode and program, for every sample, we can do this on a global scale. So where it says poly at the top, if I change that for the entire program and change it to mono, it's like putting the entire program into a choke group. That's one quick and easy way of doing it. You do have individual choke groups over here. If I press this again, you'll see you've got all of your choke groups. You've got simultaneous play. So if you select one pad and you want it to trigger others, you can. There is sample layering. You've got all of the same stuff you have on a lot of these more modern MPCs. But if you want to set individual choke groups, so you need 4 samples here in one choke group and another all within the same bank, you can do that. What we want though is to just go over to amplitude and select the 1 sample, so pad 1, which we know is here, and just make sure that the voice for that 1 sample is set to mono, so we can just do it individually. If we do it for everything, it means that you won't be able to trigger multiple samples within inside the same group because it's like putting them into a choke group. And we might want some of these extra pads later on to load some samples into and layer some stuff. So it doesn't make sense to have everything set up like that. If we're doing sample chops, it will make sense to make the entire group into one mute group. We'll probably do that in a second. But here, I just want to set it like that. Go back to mode and other, where we can take a look. Now we've got 1, so this is our voice count. Wait till it gets to the end. Yeah, it's making a fool out of me there. Did I not assign that? Let's go back to program very quickly. This is my loop, is it not? If we go to one shots, because it's mono, so we want to make sure that the amplitude for this voice is set to mono. That shouldn't be overlapping, so why is it doing that? Let me just double check. One shot playback and mono. Really, when we see our voice counts, we shouldn't be seeing that overlapping. There's no reason we should be seeing that. So let's just go to main and do mode and other again. Really, we should just be working with 1 voice count because it's a mono sample and it's not being overlapped. Yeah, there we go. Not sure, probably hadn't triggered that properly then, or, set it up. But you can see it's giving us 1 voice count out of the 32 because we're just playing 1 mono sample. So that frees up all of that other space, and you've got plenty of ways to get around your 32 voice limit. Right, let's go back to main where we can start building this into a bit of a beat. Just wanted to show you this as a workflow because I think it's pretty cool that you can send stuff through the SP, but you can also bring it back in as well to kind of bake those effects in if you need to. So our drums are done. we can call this drums. We can move over a track with the track buttons to our chops. Haven't assigned a program to this because we're going to take a sample. We're going to move over. So channel 1 is good. I need a little volume here to play the sample. Go to mode and record. Because we're using melodic stuff now, I'm going to put this back to stereo. When you're dealing with stereo sample chops, it doesn't really matter your voice limit there, because if they're inside of a mute group, you're only ever going to be playing one of those slices at any given time. So that's just one stereo sample. If we have some bunch of slices here and we've put them in a mute group and we start playing them over those drums, we should only really be getting a voice count of 3 because we've got one mono sample. And then if these are all slices in stereo, they'll only ever be triggered at one time. They don't overlap. I hope that makes sense. It's good information to know. We can turn our monitoring on now because we're on the right channel. We don't have to worry about the SP, and we should be able to hear a sample coming from here. And I found this little piano thing. It's from some kind of jazz playlist. What I want to do is I want to turn on the old Chroma console. I'm going to apply the mix so that it's fully mixed signal. We're going to keep everything down, and I don't really want to do too much. At best, a little bit of character, so maybe a little drive, just to crunch up that digital signal and make it feel a little bit more analog, kind of crack it up a little bit saturation. Maybe a little bit of cassette or something like that, just to kind of give it a kind of wobbly feel. Cassette is green. So let's do that. Let's play a little clip. I'm trying not to play too much so I don't get in trouble with the copyright. Yeah, it's very subtle, but it just starts to break up those like high frequencies a little bit. Sounds more like when you record from like vinyl. Sometimes you get that. Let's dial in a little bit of the cassette. Again, I don't want too much of any of these effects, and I don't want to play the sample for too long either. So let's leave it like that. We're going to record that in. We've got as much as we need. One thing I didn't check was just my overall volume with the record gain. Yeah. It's quite a loud sample, so I'd rather leave a little bit of headroom and then we can adjust that. We press record. It's going to wait for us. Put this back to the beginning. That's going to be good enough. So this is our chops. This is our sample. We'll turn everything down. Just make sure we've not got anything else coming through. We're going to rename this. So again, we just quickly CHOP. We've already got an S there, so we can move forward. Just going to call that chops so that I know how to find it when I'm in the sample pool. Keep mode and trim to get back to said sample pool. And then we can come in here and we can normalize this sample just to make sure it's pretty decent in terms of its volume. And then we can start chopping that up. So we'll move over to chop. If we turn this on and we go to slice, we can chop by sort of these pieces. So 16 by default, you can go all the way up to 32. Now you'll notice it moves in a point value that allows you to kind of just wiggle things around and find the slices where you want them. So we could kind of do that. If you want to move in whole numbers though and be quicker, you can hold down shift or tap tempo. And I don't know, let's say you wanted 8 equal pieces, you can dial it in like this. We don't really know what we've got here. We're just looking for something. I think I'm going to go with maybe like 10 pieces. I'm just looking for where it kind of roughly lines up, but it doesn't really matter. If I say do it, we can then move down and we can change the start and end points and just dial things in. The cool thing about this is it's non-destructive chopping. So as I move the start point here for this one, if I move the end point of this first pad, it doesn't change the start point for the next pad, which can happen on some samplers depending on how they're set up. This is non-destructive, so every single pad has the entire sample available to me, really, if I just want to scroll through. If I want to make the end point of this one really long and this one really short from wherever it is. It's completely non-destructive. I hope that makes sense, but it's much better than having the end point of this sample be the start point of the next one, and then you have to kind of do this juggling act. So anyway, let's dial in. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can see there's a little dead space, so quickly I'm just going to run through the start points. If I need to zoom out a little bit to see the transients, I will do. You don't have a zero crossing function, as far as I'm aware, where you can get it to lock to the zero crossing point. So when you're doing this, you have to listen a little bit for clicks and pops. But also, if you just get it chopped up and you need to adjust that, there's attack and envelopes and things. So you can play around and get rid of those like clicks and pops really easily. So for now, I'm going to say that's good. We need to make sure that when we're assigning this, that we are on the correct track. That's the only reason I'm coming back to that. So our chops track, we've got this program that we're not using. We're going to assign a new one to this chops track, but you need to make sure that that track is selected. If we had the drums track selected and I assign those chops, it's going to overwrite our drum samples, which we don't want. So we need to just make sure we're doing that. So we go back to mode and trim. If you've been playing around, you've been slicing something up, it's still here. It's all the information as you've chopped it, as you've sliced it. You can come back and forth, go to new program. And to be organized, so we know what we're working with, we're going to call this one chops. So we'll do CH and then O, P, and S. And then what I'm going to do here, I'm going to delete some stuff out, make a little space, and I'm just going to call this one PR, O, and then G, because it's a program. I just want to differentiate between the track and the program. So click enter and say do it. And then when we go to main, you can see we've assigned this. Now it's our chops track with our chops program. Just keeps things organized, makes your life easier. If you go to mode and the program, we can change a couple of things because by default, actually this one might be set up already. If we go to mode and program, yeah, this one's okay because it's already set to mono. If that wasn't the case, if this was set to poly, then all of those sample chops will play over the top of each other and you get a bit of a mess. But you can come straight up here and change it to mono and just set the entire program to be in a mute group, essentially. That's the quickest way of doing it. Other than going into, changing all of your individual mute groups over here. I just like using that one simple function. The other thing, shift and all, so that we can turn the volume of those chops up to, I don't know, 90 something for now. Just roughly to get them in line with the drums. We're not mixing or anything just now, but just so that it's not too loud. Tuning, we can select all and just keep it there. Now, let's say you had some little unwanted clicks and pops in there. These sound kind of okay. But if I go to amplitude and move over, still while we've got everything selected, I can change the envelope, the attack, for all of these samples at the same time. So if I wanted to get rid of any clicks and pops, up to about 3, 1, 2, or 3, just experiment. Don't need to be crazy in here. If you, obviously you can dial that in to have like a crazy attack on it, but just a small amount will usually get rid of any unwanted clicks and pops, and you can do it for all the samples at the same time, so nice and simple. We've got that set up. Let's go back to sample. Pitching, well, we can pitch all of the samples. If you move over, if you select the first 2 digits, you will do semitones, which is what I'm looking for. But if you need to fine tune, select all 4 digits with the point value, and then you can fine tune as well. Good for tuning samples, obviously. There's something there. We're not going to spend too long just so that we can make something. So for the first part, go back to main. This is our first sequence that we're working with. I kind of like this. And And I like that extra little note there. It's a little loud, but we can adjust that. We can bring the volume of that slice down. So let's just see if we can record something here. I'll do it with quantization enabled, which I think is on to 1/16 notes. We can change that later on if we need to. All right, I'm gonna undo that take. I'm looking for something to kind of fill the gap in a little bit. Yeah, just the next pad along should do it. Yeah, so this second bar is actually better in terms of the timing. This is where the step sequence is also quite handy, because don't forget we can access all of this information. If we wanted to, we just need to know the sample that we're working with. So this first pad, I'm going to have that selected already. We'll do mode, and then we'll do pad 15, shift and view. And I can see that here. This is for the first bar. If I move over to the second bar, I can see that is the better step. So if I move back to the first bar, just select this little sample, dial it off of here, and put it on here. Move back. There's no timing applied to it. It's pretty good as it is. And the next thing is to just dial in the velocity. So this is one step up, or this is max. If we come down to maybe 3, sort of -3 in terms of the velocity on that step. So down 1, 2, and 3. Just because that was a particularly loud slice. So that's our first little loop. Go back to main. Obviously, we can jazz this up. Maybe we'll put a little bit of bass in there or something. But I just want to kick us off with a couple of ideas. So that's kind of the first sequence. I would then move up to the sequence, and I would create a new one. So what I would do is press the window button when sequence is selected, and I can copy that sequence and say do it to give me sequence 2. We're still on the chops track, but I want to erase the chops so that we can put in maybe some of these other chops and create a switch up. So we'll do erase and do it. It's got rid of those, but the drums will still be there. And then we can find something else. Yeah, it might just be something like that. Yeah, good enough. So that's the second sequence. When you're up here, there is a song mode and stuff. We're not going to get into that in today's episode, but we can just do it in real time as well. So if we've got this playing, I can just bounce between the sequences. And I kind of like that. I like the fact that it's got a slightly different vibe to the second part. The switch ups gives it like a slightly different thing. In order to kind of flesh this out though, we need something going on. And I think for the first part, listening to this, and if you want to, track mute, where we can just turn the drums off for a second. There's not really a lot of bass, so we could sneak in a bass line here and try and make this like a little bit beefier, a little bit more kind of heavy and sinister. So I think that's what we'll do. We'll take the track mute back off, just because it's easy to forget they're turned on. And then what we can do is we go back to main. And here what I want to do is create a new track. Now the tracks are dependent to the sequence, so let me demonstrate that. If I move down here and we say, I want a new track, track 3, it's not titled anything at the moment because we haven't given it a title. Let's just move down to where track is, open up the window, move over, and we know we want to put bass in here. So we're going to say bass. So B, and then A, of course, and then S, move back, space 1, and delete, and close. This is now the bass track. And this is a program where we want to put a bass sample. Before we do that, with a bass sample, we could take like a C note bass sample. You've seen me do this in other episodes. You can take one C note sample and then you can play it chromatically. You can do that here. You can do it in a couple of ways. The first one is with 16 levels because it has 16 levels of velocity, but also tuning. And there's other things as well, but velocity and tuning. If you do it with 16 levels and tuning, as far as I'm aware, you can play 16 pads chromatically, but that's it. Then you're kind of stuck. If we create an instrument type, though, for the program, we can actually use these banks to have a lot more to play with. So let's do that. We go here, we make sure the program is selected, press the window button, and I want to create a new program. Well, you'll notice drum or instrument. We're going to create an instrument type this time. And we need to name it because otherwise it'll get confusing. So we'll move over to here. It's called Chops Prog 2 because, again, it's just keeping whatever I was last messing around with. And I'm going to say for this one, we're going to call it bass again. So we'll move across and just do bass and then move back here. So we got bass. We can delete. And then over here, we can delete. But I'll leave it as bass prog rather than obviously just having it named as bass, the same as the track, just so that it's easier to keep a tab on things. Close that down. Bass prog. We need a sample to load in. So mode and load. And we can find a sample to use. Go to our bass folder. Again, I've got tons of bass folders, different samples. That one sounds pretty good. We'll use that one. We won't dilly-dally. Let's put it onto the first pad and say yes and do it. Sorry, that's because I've tried to do it twice. Let's go to main. That should be loaded up. Now, you can hear that's super low. We're using the banks. We can shift up. I'll keep it quite high for a second. If we do mode and program, you'll notice the program is an instrument type of program. It's different from the one we were using before, which was a drum type. You get a lot of the same options. It just looks slightly different in here. So one of the first things, actually, before we start that, let's go to mode and trim. Let's just take a quick look at the sample. It's a little quiet. We could normalize it just to make sure we're getting enough out of it. Mode and back to the program. Amplitude. Now, this is the first one that I'd start off with. Currently, this is in mono, so it's handy because it means we can't overlap that sample. This is being a bass line. We don't want it to overlap. We don't want the sample layering up. You can hear it's not playing over the top of itself. If I went to the top here and I shift this into poly, you can get chords because we're allowing that sample to overlap. But for a bass line, that's not going to be very good, so we're going to leave it in mono. You'll notice that as we press it, it's very short, but we can crank up the release and just let it play out longer, which is, again, what I want for a bass line. There's effects, we could do all of that kind of stuff, but really that's all I want. I just want a very simple bass line. If we go to filter, I might try a filter, but this doesn't really have a lot of high-end information. It's already quite a filtered down bass line. But if we wanted to, we could move over here, apply a filter. You've got two filters you could apply, but we'll start with low pass. Just dial the frequency down. But as I said, it's already pretty filtered, so we don't need to do a lot there. The next thing we can do is just go back to main. And with track mutes, I'm going to mute the drum, so I'm just listening to the bass and the chops, see if we can work out a very simple bass line. Usually I'll start a little higher up and then work it out from there. So if we go back to main for a second. That's probably going to be good enough. Really simple. I don't want it to repeat. There's like a second note in there, but I only want that to happen in the first bar and then it wait for it to come back around again. Otherwise, it gets a little bit too repetitive. I like that. Super simple. Kept the quantize on. Sometimes that's all it needs. Sure, we could maybe apply an effect to that. Maybe a little distortion might just gritty that bass up a touch, something. But for this episode, I'm just going to leave it like that. So that's our first sequence that we've added bass line to. We can come back, put our drums back in. And obviously, we're not doing any mixing, but we'll mix the levels a little bit later on, just balance everything out a touch. But the concept is there, and it doesn't need to take forever. It needs to be quite a simple thing. Now, we've got to switch up. So if we go back to main and we move up, I just want to show you something here as well. So we've created a third track bass with the bass program. If I move over and I go to my second sequence, notice that track disappears, doesn't exist anymore because it's completely independent. Even if I scroll through, you won't find it. So just keep that in mind as you're creating new sequences. They're also kind of track and program dependent. Now, I can still find the original program, that still exists. So if I go over here somewhere, where is it? Chops, bass program with the instrument. There we go. We can assign that to our second sequence where we got our switch up, where we got this going on. But just keep that in mind that it is completely independent and we can create a new track there. We can even give that a name. So if we wanted it to be consistent across the board, I would come in here and yeah, we would just quickly name that as bass and bass like this. Get rid of everything else and close. So everything kind of lines up, but just, yeah, be aware that it doesn't transfer over. So same thing here, track mute and get rid of the drums. And again, real simple. If we remember, it says real simple and then forgets what he's playing. I think it's that. Okay, bass line for the second sequence. Really, in terms of the concept, the idea of the beat, that's pretty much as far as I would take it because a lot of the time it doesn't need too much more. One of these could be the intro before the track kicks in. It could be a copy again of, say, sequence 1. If we move up and we go back to our first sequence, let's say we wanted that to be the intro, we would just make another copy and say, all right, we're going to copy that again. And that one is now going to be called sequence 03. We need to start naming things to make it, easy to see. The cool thing with the sequences is the track mutes are independent as well. So with this third sequence, which is a copy of the first one, if I go to track mute and I turn the drums off here, if I'm playing this, and let's say we go back to sequence 1, just make sure our track mutes are off here. It means as we bounce through those sequences, it's going to change. So if we're on sequence 3, and I move over to sequence 1, so this one ends. You get the idea. You can delete the information if you needed to for some reason. But for me, that's kind of good enough. I think the final thing I'll do is maybe just a little vinyl static, a little noise here and there to kind of transition, and maybe one little vocal thing, just something fun to play around with. So let's start with that, but let's be organized. This is our main sequence. It's number 1. It's the kind of the main loop. So with the highlighted sequence and window, we just move over and then we can rename these. So we'll call this, where's my little arrow button? Let's go to M-A-I-N, and then just kind of move over, delete most of this out. give it a space, and then say loop. And since I just come back and then do P like this. So that's called the main loop. That's sequence 1. If we go back up and we scroll down, sequence 2 is the switch up with the drums. So I'll call that one switch, will probably be easy enough to do. If we do S, W, I, what am I looking for? T, C, and H. Switch, just like that. That's the switch up. And then down below, our third sequence that we created is technically the intro. And you can move around the orders and do stuff, but I'm not worried about that for now. You can see there's a move button if you want to switch. Let's call that intro. So we need I, N, T, R. And let's go for, oh, just checking the time there because I do have other things to do today. Right, there we go. Nice and organized, nice and easy to see what we're working with. Let's find a little bit of vinyl static, and we'll start with sequence 1. Ideally, what we could have done was put the vinyl static in before we copied the sequences, and then you can just kind of work it the other way, sort of work backwards if you like. But we'll do mode and load, and we'll put it in this way. So let's go across to our samples. Somewhere down the bottom, I have textures, and I think there should be some analog noise. I think this one, yeah. Got some vinyl there. Say do it. Now, the one thing here, where do we want to put all of this? I'm going to add a new track, which is going to be the final track, and we'll call that, like, I don't know, effects or something like that. So let's open this up, the window, and change this to F, and then X, and delete everything else out. So that's effects, and this is going to be the effects program. So if we move over to here and do the same thing, I can do F and then X. And what I'll do is I'll delete that out. We'll delete all of that actually, and just space and P, R, O, G. Close. So that's the effects program. We're just going to put any vocal samples, any last little bits in here. Go to mode and load. And now that we've set that up, when I load this, where do I want to put it? It's a long sample. Might have to trim it and see what happens. But we want to put it onto pad 1 on bank A. And say yes. And go to mode and to the program. Go to samples. We can see it's loaded up. Couple of things here. It's the same deal. I don't want it to overlap as a sample. So I'm going to just make sure the voice is set to mono. So it's monophonic. It's not going to allow that to play over itself. And then we can just record it in. If we just go to main, just make sure we've not got anything happening with the track mutes that we need to worry about. And record, play start. Again, volume-wise, we can dial that into taste. But I just want to quickly run through all of the sequences and add it into all of these. So it's going to be the same thing. We've still got this, even though the track name has changed, doesn't matter. We'll tidy that up later on. But the program is still the same. So record, play, start. One thing we don't have here is our drums because we turned them off. So we just tidy up as we're going. We'll move to the top and we'll move to the intro. And we're going to do the same thing, record it in. And then mode and program where we could take a look at the sample and we could, I don't know, maybe just dial it back a little bit, just make it a little bit quieter. I only want it to be sort of a bit of a background noise. A little bit of vinyl static. Let's find an effect noise, like a transition noise to put in, probably not on this sequence. We'll probably have it somewhere else. So let's move up and put it onto the main loop. Maybe just a little crash, a little something to switch. Actually, maybe not even here. Maybe have it just on the switch up itself. Go to mode and load, where we're still loading into that same program. I'm going to come out of here and find some transitions. I've got a bunch of those in folders. That symbol might do. You might be able to use that rather than spending too long. We'll load it. We'll put it onto pad 2 in this new program. Mode and trim so that we can take a look at it. Now you see, it's relatively quiet. So let's normalize it. And the thing I want to do is I want to chop off all of the space at the beginning and just have a bit of the tail. Just like that. We'll discard, get rid of that. Good enough. And then when we're on our main, it's on pad 2 is what I'm looking for. Sounds okay, but if we go back into the program, it's a little loud and we could probably pitch it better. 2 semitones, let's not mess around. The one thing I accidentally did there was I went back into record rather than overdub record, which is important on the MPC. So on this particular thing where I had my vinyl noise, I've just undone that. So I quickly overdub and record, just put the vinyl back in. There we go. I don't think we'll do too much, just a little vocal sample. And for that, I'm going to go to YouTube and I'm going to use the new acapella thing that I was talking about at the beginning of the video that we've set up. The reason for that being is that aside from taking full acapellas to mess around and do remixes, which is what I'm going to be using it for, it's cool to just take the odd little vocal snippet every once in a while from one of these songs. So let's go with West Side Gun and just look for him to say something that's kind of fun. Let's go with Dunks and see. Should be able to hear that. Now, what do we need to do? Mode and record. Got our monitoring on, lead with volume.
Hold a torch to the wax pipe. I'm a torch, you a match. Guess you in the kitchen, flipping. You broke niggas better pay attention. 20K a day, easy. Chop the nigga hands off for his about making 20K a day, easy. Chop the nigga hands off for his break steady greasy. I make this fly shit look easy. Finish guess.
Yeah, that's good enough. There's still some distortion and stuff coming through that, just in case you're wondering about the acapella. It's cleaner sounding than that. It's because it's still coming through the chroma console, so it's crushing it a little with the lo-fi effect. But I kind of like that for what we're doing here. So we could rename this very quickly. Let's just call it Gun, so that we know what the sample is. Just move back and do that one like that's, and over. And
glass of yak, splash the ice. My life's a roller.
Yeah, that's still coming through there. It's still got that crunch to it. But that's okay. Let's go to mode and trim where we can find that new sample. And we're going to turn the volume down here.
K a day, easy. Chop the nigga hands off for his break steady greasy. I make this fly shit look easy.
Now, I just want to chop out from here. I'm going to use the Q links to do that quickly, because that is a quick way of doing it. We can move it to there. Where's the end?
Make this fly shit look easy.
And then, yeah, trim the end point down. Oops, it's because we pushed it. I say makes it look easy, but yeah, you just want to have that set there, that like that. Edit and discard.
I make this fly shit look easy.
Yeah, pretty cool. Now, if we wanted to, we could use some delay. In fact, let's maybe do that. So let's go to mode and program. We know this is called Gun. I'm going to normalize it to get the best volume. Mode and program. We've got all of these free spaces. So pad 3, we'll find Gun. And then we'll go to our effects. Now for this pad, I want to do a send effect to, what have we got here? We've got our effects. So do effects 1. We'll send that over full amounts. Mode and pad 12, where we've got effects 1. Currently nothing assigned. I'm just going to put a little delay on there and select that.
I make this fly shit look easy.
Ooh, there you go. You can hear that effect coming through. It's a pretty loud sample now, so we'll turn that down in a second. But a couple of things here. First one, feedback's pretty crazy. The mix and our level is pretty loud.
I make this fly shit look easy.
And I'm going to sync it.
I make this fly shit look easy.
And let's go down, turn the level up a bit more.
I make this fly shit look easy.
Needs to be a bit louder still. dampening down, feedback a little less.
I make this fly shit look easy.
Maybe a little louder still.
I make this fly shit look easy.
Yeah, good enough. Then what we'll do, mode and program, back to the sample. It's because I normalized it was already pretty loud. Let's dial it back.
I make this fly shit look easy. I make this fly shit.
I don't mind if that sample overlaps for a second, but let's just see.
I make this fly shit look easy. I make this fly shit look easy.
Just want to go back into trim. I just want to take out the little dead space at the beginning so I can try and line it up.
Easy. I make this fly. I make this fly shit look easy.
Go back to the program.
I make this fly shit look easy. I make this fly shit look easy.
Yeah, just like that. Mode, main, record it in.
I make this fly shit look easy. I make this fly shit look easy.
And I'm not getting as much through in terms of my effects there. So mode and effects, let's just turn that up a little bit.
I make this fly shit look easy. I make this fly shit look easy.
Yeah, good enough. Still a little loud in terms of that sample.
I make this fly shit look easy. I make this fly shit look easy.
You get the idea. We haven't mixed or mastered anything, so that's going to be good enough for today's episode. I don't want to make it too long, but that is really the essence of a beat. We've done it all here on this little MPC 1000. Now, you might be watching at home and think it seems long-winded in comparison to a more modern MPC, or maybe, hopefully, I've proved that it doesn't have to be. It's actually a pretty simple process. I don't know how long we've been on this video, but of course I'm explaining stuff and stopping every 5 minutes. In real time, just sitting down and making a beat. This thing is an absolute pleasure to work with. And I've got no affiliation, I've got no reason to sell you on an old sampler from 20 years ago, probably 20 plus. It's just something that I really like to use. In terms of finishing off, what we're going to do a couple of little cheaty kind of tricks here. The first one, maybe, let's go to mode and 12, just to make it sound a little bit better. We'll balance things. Let's quickly just have a listen. Let's use a little bit of the master compressor. So we'll use a bit of master EQ as well. Let's turn that on, and a little master compressor. The one thing about the default for the master EQ is that it puts a really good strong bass bump. Sometimes you want it, sometimes you don't. I generally do want it, but if I haven't left any headroom, it's going to distort real quick. Just a little bit hacky. What we'll do is we'll also turn on some effect here. We'll turn on a little bit of the vinyl sim, dial this back a touch. Yeah, it sounds pretty cool running through the SP, just to kind of balance things for now, just to give us a quick cheapy little master. But the problem there is that I don't want to use it as an effect on here. I want to use it as one of the built-in effects. So I'm going to go to EFX settings. So I should be able to do that with Shift and EFX, and then just move over so I can see what I've got set up. So I've got an equalizer and I've got the vinyl sim. So the vinyl sim is what I want. Let's make sure that these are turned on. Now, because we've done a little EQ here and we're also EQing on this side of things, it's getting a little bit heavy in the low end, to say the least. So if we do Shift and EFX, we can just quickly move over to the EQ. Yeah, I'm kind of boosting the low end a good bit more there. I'm just going to take that low end boost out. We can dial it in a second. We're also getting another little increase in gain in the high end, which I might not necessarily want. Just dial that back. without balancing. It's a little bass heavy, but that's going to do us for today's episode. As I said, the reason I wanted to do that is because I don't want it applied here. I want to be able to use my stop effect and my isolator. I want to set the BPM on the SP as well to match the tempo. I think did we just stay with 80 BPM in the end? Yeah, we did. So that's fine. It kind of matches up. It means if I use the delay effect here, it's going to sync roughly with what's happening. Anyway, I'm going to sign off for this particular episode. It was something that I just wanted to create. I wanted to noodle around, make a little bit of a beat, talk about and explain the process, promote my new a cappella channel a little bit because it is important to me to kind of build that up. So again, I appreciate anyone who takes the time to go and check it out, particularly if you subscribe and help me out with it. But yeah, I hope this has been useful. I hope it shows you that these older samplers can still be just as good as the more modern samplers. And all we'll do to finish off is we'll just play out on the beat. I'll noodle around a little bit, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care.